and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kelly, your host, and it's a, what day of the week is it? Is it a
Wednesday?
Thursday? Oh, it's a Wednesday, but we're doing it like it's a Thursday because it's 2 hours of open forum.
Hey,
So
how about that?
It'll be interesting to see if we get any groovy music. Jimmy Akin, our guest both hours today, 888-318-7884, and you probably know what to do. You can call with any question that you've got. If you're new to the program, you don't have to be Catholic to call. You don't have to be Christian to call. You got a question about faith, about God, about the Bible, about Jesus, anything else, 888-318-7884. Jimmy is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author of The Bible is a Catholic Book and The Words of Eternal Life and many other books, and the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
Yeah, how about that?
How about that? Friday. What do we got Friday?
The Canals of Mars.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot the Canals of Mars.
In the 19th century, there were a group of astronomers, starting with an Italian one named Schiaparelli, and then the American astronomer Percival Lowell, and many others who reported seeing canals on the surface of Mars, which then led to a discussion of Martian civilization and things like that. So this week we're looking at that story, and next week we're going to be looking at what the scientific evidence we today have says about the possibility of life on Mars, and the evidence is that there's a much bigger possibility than most people are aware of.
Yeah, I got to talk with you a little bit about it, and it's fascinating. I just remember years ago, must have been 20 years ago, some press conference about what looked like
1996.
Was it 96? Oh, so it was a long time ago, and then you never heard that much about it afterwards.
Yeah,
about
well, that was one data point, which was actually a pretty good one, and there have been multiple ones since then, and before it as well.
All right,
the guy who designed the primary test on the Viking landers in the 1970s, he only passed on a few months ago, but he became convinced that we actually detected life in the 1970s. And he continued to monitor the evidence as it came in. And if you go to his website, which is still up, he has a summary of the evidence that he wrote last year. And he's got like 26 different pieces of evidence.
Wow. Our number is 888-318-7884. That's Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. It drops Friday mornings. You can find it by just searching Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. I bet you could even just put in Mysterious World and you'd find it. But that's just a bet. I don't actually know that.
Hopefully.
I haven't tried it. Again, 888-318-7884 is the idea that, because I know that Mars lost most of its atmosphere.
Yeah.
Is the idea that life... that it was flourishing and then the atmosphere went away and there may be some remnants there, or what's the theory on life on Mars?
Remnants of the atmosphere is certainly there.
Yeah, but I mean,
and certainly Mars was a much more congenial environment in the past. It had a much thicker atmosphere, and it had lots of liquid water flowing on the surface. It had warmer temperatures.
Yeah.
And if life ever gets a foothold,
it's pretty hard to get rid of it.
Yeah. Something, I mean, maybe big complex organisms might die, but bacteria breed really fast and they're really simple, and thus they adapt
really well
to new circumstances really well. As Jeff Goldblum says in Jurassic Park, life finds a way.
In that inimitable Jeff Goldblum way.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I'm going to try to do it. All right, 888-318-7884, the number. Looking forward to that. I'm interested in the Canals of Mars. Let's go to Mason. We'll start with Mason in Nashville. Mason called yesterday, and I called him Nathan. So I'm really glad Mason called back again. Mason, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So, Jimmy, full disclosure, I'm an Anglican, but the All Saints and All Souls Days had me thinking a lot about purgatory, the afterlife, and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And my question, and really just trying to kind of understand where you guys are coming from on all of this, my question is essentially, like, from what I understand, the saints bypass purgatory and go directly to heaven. And so my question is, are they going directly to heaven because they've reached a state of perfect sanctification, like in the Wesleyan sense, or what exactly gets them to be able to bypass purgatory?
Well, so although the church holds that it's possible to bypass purgatory, and someone who does bypass it would go directly to heaven, it doesn't hold that all the saints who are in heaven bypass purgatory, because the whole point of purgatory is to get you ready for heaven. And so anyone who is in heaven is perfectly purified from not only the guilt of their sins, but also from disordered desires as well. That's the principal thing, according to John Paul II, that purgatory does, is it purifies you of disordered desires that you had in this life. But there is no guarantee that any given saint went directly there. That is not part of church teaching. I've sometimes heard Catholics speculate things like that, but that's sort of a folk Catholic idea that doesn't correspond to church teaching and frankly doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because if most people go to purgatory and all people who go to purgatory end up in heaven, then over time, most people in heaven would have gone through purgatory first, because only a comparative few would not have a need for purgatory. And so most of the people in heaven would have gone through purgatory first. In terms of what's required in order to go to directly to heaven without purgatory, one needs to have no need of the consequences of personal sin. And so consequently, the way John Paul II understood this, it would seem to imply that you need to be free of all disordered desires. And that would seem to be a very small number of people, if any. The church holds out this as a possibility, but it doesn't have a teaching about how many people actually fall into that category. And so that would be a matter of theological speculation, but given the realities of human nature, certainly most people die with some disordered attachments, and that would mean that the number of people who don't need to go through purgatory would be comparatively few.
What do you think, Mason?
I mean, that definitely helps me kind of wrap my head around things. Maybe, I don't know if I had heard someone say that or if it was just an assumption of mine. I thought I heard someone say that in regards to like invocation of the saints, the assumption was that they were all in heaven, not in purgatory. And so that's why it made sense to invoke them. Maybe I misunderstood what I heard.
Well, someone could have said something like that too, but that also doesn't fully correspond to the Catholic understanding of things. I wouldn't be at all surprised if someone said that, even a Catholic saying that. But the Church acknowledges that the holy souls in purgatory can also pray for us. So if you're praying to someone and they died in God's friendship, they can be aware of your prayer and pray for you whether they're in purgatory or in heaven.
Mason, thanks. Appreciate it. I'm going to keep going because every line's full already. Let's go to William in Saskatchewan, listening. That's up in Canada, listening on the Catholic Answers app. William, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Okay, how's it going?
Very well, thank you. Is it cold up there yet?
That's good. It's actually been a very nice fall. Sometimes we have a few feet of snow by this time.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear it.
My question for Jimmy is if he's a fan of the Ozark Mountain Daredevils.
So for people who may not be aware, the Ozark Mountain Daredevils are a country rock band from the Ozark Mountains, and that's where I grew up. I grew up in the Boston Mountains, which are the highest part of the Ozark Mountains in northwest Arkansas. The Ozarks also extend into southern Missouri and eastern Oklahoma and so forth. And the Ozark Mountain Daredevils are from right in the area where I grew up. In fact, I know they played in my hometown of Fayetteville at various points. So I'm definitely aware of them. In terms of am I a fan of them, well, I'm actually not that familiar with their music. They belonged to a generation of musicians that was sort of right before I became musically aware, at least of pop music. And so I didn't really grow up listening to them. They weren't on the radio a lot when I was growing up. And I have heard some of their music and some of their songs I like a lot of, musicians these days, though, and in the 20th century, they have some elements in their music that aren't as wholesome as they could be, and so I'm not a fan of all of their songs. But the bottom line is, I'm open to whatever's good. I'm not open to whatever I find problematic, and ultimately I'm not hugely familiar with their work, although I have listened to some of their songs.
Okay, William?
So, I was just going to ask, what's your thoughts on listening to an artist like Jimi Hendrix, who has songs titled Voodoo Child and stuff like that? Like, could you listen to other stuff that doesn't have to do with evil?
Yeah, well, it's the same thing. I mean, you cannot avoid problematic people in this world because everybody in the world today is problematic. And St. Paul acknowledges this. In talking to the Corinthians, he says, look, I'm not asking you to not associate with pagans because then you'd have to leave the world. And you can't do that. So the correct approach to such things, whether it's pagan or modern American or anything else, is applying a principle that he articulates in 1 Thessalonians 5, which is test everything and hold fast to what is good. And we see Paul himself doing this with Greek literature, even Greek literature talking about pagan gods. If you look, for example, in Acts chapter 17, he's addressing the men of the Areopagus in Athens, and he quotes from some pagan writers talking about pagan understanding of the gods, and he sorts it and says, okay, here are some elements that you guys are right about. And so if Paul, using critical thinking and using his Christian faith, was able to engage with imperfect cultural works and sort the bad from the good, then we can do the same thing, whether those works are literary or movies or TV shows or books or games or music or whatever it may be. Test everything and hold fast to what is good.
William, thanks. Got to go to the break. Appreciate the call from Saskatchewan, and I'm glad you're having a mild fall up there. Right now, we've got the store-wide sale going. I don't think they're shipped to Canada for the $5 flat rate program, but anywhere in the continental United States, any order, $5 flat rate right now, and everything's on sale for our big store-wide sale. Shop.catholic.com.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
A brand new item at EWTNRC.com this month is the Our Lady of Kibeho statue. Created by EWTN in consultation with Rwandan genocide survivor and popular host and author Immaculée Ilibagiza. This new statue is based on the church-approved apparitions of the Blessed Mother to 3 young girls in Africa. To order, go to EWTNRC.com and search for item number 747.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live, 2 hours of bonus open forum today on this Wednesday. Jimmy Akin here with us both hours. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Going down to going from Saskatchewan, Canada, down to Pensacola, Florida. Listening on Catholic.com. Donald in Pensacola. You are up next, Donald. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, my question is it sinful to watch a TV series such as a Ghost Hunter show where they say, gee, constantly? It's almost like slapstick, however. Is that sinful, and or might it even be just offensive to God? Or should I not watch that stuff?
Okay, so this question relates directly to what we said before, and the same principles are going to apply, but let me approach it from, at least initially, from a slightly different angle. So saying things like, oh my God, or Jesus Christ, or stuff like that as an expression of, as interjections, I guess is the way to say it using the grammatical category. What those are is interjections. Using divine references as interjections has commonly been understood as taking the Lord's name in vain. It is not 100% clear that that is the case. I can imagine an argument against that, in particular because in some circumstances you can mean them reverently. I mean, something astonishing could happen, and you could legitimately be invoking God when you say, "Oh my God," meaning like, "Oh my God, help us."
Yeah,
or
right.
something like that. So it's not the words themselves that are intrinsically evil. There's nothing wrong with "oh" or the word "my" or the word "God." It's what you're intending to do with them. Now, if you're intending to desacralize them, to treat them as non-sacred things, if that's your conscious intent, well, then that's bad, because God is sacred. And so you should honor God as sacred and treat his name as sacred. On the other hand, if people aren't intending any offense to God, and they're just doing this because it's something they grew up hearing, and it's never really occurred to them to think about it in this way, then they could be innocently ignorant of any deliberate offense of God, in which case they would not be offending God because they're not trying to treat his name with disrespect. They're doing this unthinkingly. So I wouldn't be too quick to judge the hearts of people who do this. In terms of, can you witness other people do this in some situation? Well, Psychel it. If someone says, "Oh my God," in a thoughtless way in your presence, do you have to run out of the room?
I have not thus far done that.
How about close your eyes and stop up your ears?
No, I don't think you have to do that.
Do you have to avoid that person forevermore?
No, no.
Okay.
If any of the answers are yes, I'm blowing it right now.
No, you're getting them right.
Okay, good.
In fact, if someone's doing that, you could do a service to them by evangelizing them.
Mm-hmm.
And that means being around a person even if they're not perfect. So that shows us we don't have to run away from these situations. And consequently, it is not intrinsically wrong to either be around people or to watch shows or listen to radio shows or whatever just because someone is doing something with language that they shouldn't. It doesn't mean I'm endorsing what they're doing. And as long as I'm not corrupting my own morals by doing it, as long as I'm not setting a sinful example to someone else, then it does not rise to the level of a personal fault. And if there are other adequate reasons to watch or listen to something, well, then you can kind of hold your nose and ignore the bad stuff for the sake of the good stuff, just like St. Paul did when he read Greek literature about pagan gods. And you better believe that literature about pagan gods said all kinds of things that would be untrue and be regarded as blasphemous from a Christian context. But that didn't stop St. Paul from applying the principle he articulates in 1 Thessalonians 5, which is test everything and hold fast to what's good. He didn't say run away from everything if it has a tiny bit of stuff in it it shouldn't.
Right. Okay. Donald, thanks very, very much. I appreciate the call. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest. We head now to Phoenix, Arizona. Sebastian, watching on YouTube. You are up next. Sebastian, go ahead with your question.
Hey, guys. Hope you guys are doing well today.
We are. Thank you.
Mike. Yep. My question is something that I actually had my little brother tell me when I was having a conversation with him. And one thing that kind of is like difficult for him to understand is like a concept of like, if one of us were to make it to heaven, once it's our time and we were to make it, but then like a friend or a family member, if they weren't to make it, is there like a sadness about that in heaven, or like what's the feeling of that? And
okay,
I just didn't know how to respond to that.
We don't know a huge amount about what heaven's going to be like because we haven't directly experienced it, and based on what we're given to understand in the New Testament, it exceeds our expectations. And so our minds in this life are not configured to be able to process the full reality of heaven. And so as a result, the New Testament gives us images of what heaven will be like that hint at what it's like and reveal something of what it's like, but don't disclose everything about what it's like because our brains are too puny for that right now. Well, one of the things that Scripture does reveal about heaven, this is at the end of the book of Revelation. If you want to look it up, it's in Revelation chapter 22. And it says that in the heavenly city, the New Jerusalem, in mankind's final state, God will wipe away every tear from the eyes of the people who live in his heavenly city, that there will be no more crying or sadness or pain anymore, for the old order of things has passed away. And if you take that literally and as an absolute, well, that would mean that we won't be sad in heaven, even if some people we love in this life have not made it to heaven. Now, that raises a question of, well, and so that's been the classic understanding. The classic understanding of all Christians has been that we won't be sad in heaven, even if some of our earthly loved ones are not there. Well, how can we make sense of that? There are a number of possibilities, and I can't tell you for sure which one is true because it's a matter of speculation. But we can be comforted by the fact that even though they're not in heaven, they still are in the hands of a merciful God, and he's not going to do anything to them that's unjust or that they haven't chosen. And so he's both just and merciful even with the lost. And even if they've brought on frustration by cutting themselves off from God, the source of all goodness, well, okay, that's bad, but it's also something where God is respecting them. He's respecting their choice. And that provides some consolation that, that God's letting them have what they chose, what they want. And if they're frustrating themselves because they choose not to be with God, well, that's their choice, and we'll respect that just the way God does, and so it won't be a source of pain for us. That's one possible way of understanding how this could work. I would say, there are other possible ways of understanding how it can work that have been talked about down through history, but one way or another, it seems that our minds will be configured in such a way and will have such an accurate and deep perspective on the way things are, including the way God's justice and mercy work, that we won't feel pain if not everybody we care about is in heaven.
Sebastian, I hope that helps with your little brother, and we'll leave it there because there's lots of folks on the line. I'm going to go to Omaha, Nebraska now. Samuel in Omaha, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. You're up, Samuel. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello, Jimmy. My question is that, so I'm in a relationship with this a girl. She's Christian and she's a strong, firm believer. However, she said that she is non-denominational, and for me as a Catholic, I would love to introduce her to my faith. Mm-hmm. So what would be the best way for me to introduce somebody that is not Catholic into Catholicism?
Well, there's not a single way of doing it. And so in terms of what's the best way to do it, that really depends on who you're dealing with and what their background is and what their preferences are. And you know her better than I do, so I'll have to leave the specifics of how to do it to you, but I can give you some suggestions. One possibility is whenever you're talking about your faith, then your mutual Christian faith, then in a winning and positive way, you can say, when she describes something she believes, you can say, that's very interesting. And if Catholics agree with it, you could say, and as a Catholic, I agree with that. Or if it's something that is different than the Catholic faith, you can say, well, that's very interesting. Coming from a Catholic perspective, here's what I would say about that. And you don't have to say you're wrong. That could put her off. You could just say, well, here's what I would say from my perspective. And that might lead to a dialogue between the two of you where you could maybe look up, discussions of the topics that come up between you. There's a lot of resources at Catholic.com. You could also say, hey, there's this program I sometimes listen to called Catholic Answers Live. And even though it's a Catholic show, it's got a lot of stuff that I think you might be interested in. Maybe you'd like to listen to that, or maybe we'd listen to it together. Or if Catholic Answers Live is a little too Catholic for her at the moment, you could say, hey, there's this program I like called Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World that's about all these mysteries. And it does have a Catholic element in it, but it's about these mysteries. Maybe you'd want to check that out. You also could do things like invite her to go to Mass with you, just so she can learn about what Catholic worship is like and see how Catholics live out their Christian faith in church. We have a little booklet that I wrote called The Words of Eternal Life that's designed to be read by anybody, no matter where they are on the faith spectrum. And I'd like to, if possible, Samuel, send you a copy of that, and you could read it and pass it on to her.
Samuel, if you hang on, we'll get your address and we'll send you a copy of Jimmy's book, Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It. But we got to take a break right now, so we'll leave that in your hands. If you hang on the line, Thomas will get your information and we'll send it to you. We're going to continue with Open Forum. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Lots of folks on the line, so lots more questions coming up right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Most of us Catholic parents agree our number one goal in life is to pass on the faith to our children. But here's the bad news. Today's world has a million ways to steal your kid's soul. Don't be afraid, says Father Sebastian Walsh. God loves your children even more than you do, and He desires their salvation more than anything. In his groundbreaking new book, Always a Catholic, Father Walsh shows you how to cooperate with God to bring about the fulfillment of His will for your kids. Always a Catholic reminds us that keeping our kids in the faith is about the way we live our Catholicism in our own lives and as a family from day to day. Order your copy of Always a Catholic by visiting shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Matt Swaim here. Tomorrow on the Sunrise Morning Show, we'll celebrate the feast of St. Charles Borromeo, the great Italian saint of the Counter-Reformation, and talk Bible foods with Rita Heichenfeld. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Did you just improvise that? Did you just find that in the file and decided I'll play that for him?
Nice.
Thanks, Darren. A little bit of groovy music for you on a Wednesday. Because Jimmy Akin's here and it's 2 hours of Open Forum, and why not? You're welcome to call with your questions, 888-318-7884. I will let you know, though, there's a lot of folks on the line right now, and we're going to work our way through those questions. Let's go up to North Dakota, listening on Real Presence Radio. Josh in North Dakota. You are up, Josh. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, Jimmy and Cy.
Hi, Josh.
I just want to open. It's an honor to talk to you both. I've listened to Catholic radio for years. This is my first time ever calling in.
Oh, this better be a good one then, Josh. I hope you've got a good one.
I hope it is.
Okay.
If it's a bad one, I might never call in again.
There are no bad questions, only bad answers.
So I was listening to your opening monologue about Mars and with the deteriorating atmosphere and everything, and it sounded a lot like C.S. Lewis's Out of the Silent Planet and kind of some of the basic premises he uses there. And I'm just curious, was he drawing on any scientific data he had at the time in writing that story or anything like that?
Well, let's see. So Lewis died in 1963, actually on the same day that President Kennedy did, so November 22nd. And that means that he could have been drawing on scientific information or the scientific understanding of Mars as it was up to that point. And so I'm pretty sure he did at least some research in terms of what are conditions likely to be on Mars. I mean, he probably had absorbed some idea just of, prior speculation just from growing up in the first part of the 20th century, because there was a lot of speculation. You had Percival Lowell writing his books about Mars and the canals. You had H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds novel, which Lewis would have, I'm sure, been familiar with, since H.G. Wells was a fellow British author and very, very influential. So I would think that he would have been drawing on the understanding of it at the time. That doesn't mean he was adhering to it fully, because he's writing works of science fiction and really sort of science fantasy literature here. And if he was trying to be strictly accurate to the scientific understanding of his day, he didn't do a perfect job. Because I know from reading Out of the Silent Planet that so when the main character, Ransom, is transported from Earth to Mars, he feels gravity becoming gradually weaker as he leaves Earth, and then as he starts approaching Mars, it starts gradually growing stronger again, as if there is this slow diminution of gravity followed by a turnaround and an increase in gravity. And that's not actually how gravity works. Once you get out of Earth's gravity well, you're going to be in microgravity and basically zero gravity, but it's really microgravity. And you're going to stay in microgravity until you enter Mars orbit or Mars's gravity well. So you won't see this slow diminution and slow increase. I would say that there was, up to the 1960s, a lot of speculation about life, even advanced life on Mars. There was an article that I mentioned in the upcoming Mysterious Worlds episodes that was published like around 1960 that was saying, hey, we've got these images from the Martian surface and they're best explained by suggesting there's plants down there. And so the idea of Mars having a more robust biosphere than we today would suppose is something that would have been consistent with the science of C.S. Lewis's time.
Does that make sense, Josh?
Yes, it does. I'm looking forward to the episode on Friday to hear more.
Well, I got to say, that long time listening to Catholic radio, first call, I think that was a very fine question. And so I would like to send you Jimmy Akin's book, The Bible is a Catholic Book. So if you hold on, and I definitely want you to feel like you should call again. So hang on.
Well, thank you. I definitely will.
All right, we'll get your information and we'll send you The Bible is a Catholic Book from Jimmy Akin. The number is 888-318-7884. We're going to the Bay Area in California. Gabriel in the Bay Area, watching on YouTube, which I believe was invented in the Bay Area. Gabriel, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
All right, I just had a little question about free will. So from what I understand, I think everything must have a cause or it's uncaused, including our own actions, which if something's uncaused, I think it'd probably be random. And if it's caused, then eventually it would have like a chain of causality that goes outside of ourselves. So from that perspective, it kind of seems like none of our actions we can have control over. I'm wondering if maybe my reasoning is wrong, or maybe there's a way of reconciling that with the idea of free will, because I know that I think Catholics generally believe in free will, or maybe compatibilism or something like that.
Yeah, so the Catholic Church, Catholics not only generally believe in free will, the Catholic Church teaches that we have free will. And in terms of explaining how that works philosophically, there are different possibilities. Ever since the last few centuries, there was this desire to try to, on the part of certain people as a result of the scientific revolution, to try to envision the world as sort of a clockwork universe where it was basically a cosmic machine where every event was determined by a prior set of conditions that were sufficient to dictate each outcome. So the idea was, at least as it's sometimes articulated, if you could know the precise positions of all of the particles of matter energy at the beginning of the universe, and you knew the laws pertaining to these particles, then you could predict every event in the entire history of the universe, because it would just unfold the way a clock grinds through its range of possibilities in an orderly, predictable manner. Well, then quantum mechanics happened in the beginning of the 20th century, and quantum mechanics indicated that if the world works that way, we don't have evidence for it, because there are phenomena, especially very small ones, but it can apply to larger ones too. But there are phenomena in the world that do not seem to proceed in that kind of mechanistic, fully predictable way. And so as a result, we need to describe various phenomena in terms of what's called the wave function. And the wave function, one way of understanding it is it's basically a set of probabilities of where you would find a particle, like let's say an electron or, an atom, where you would find it if you measured it. But you can't predict exactly where you will find it the way you could if the universe operated in a clockwork fashion. Instead, you can only describe the possibilities of where it's most likely to be found and where it's less likely to be found. And so that suggested, okay, well, this clockwork view is wrong. There's more to it, at least to a lot of scientists and philosophers. That's what it suggested. And so even in quantum mechanics, we don't see pure randomness. I mean, suppose, for example, Cy Kellett, I said, pick a number randomly between 1 and 100. Okay, so if I said that, notice I haven't. I just said, if I did.
But I did pick one just in case you do.
Okay, well, we'll get to that. But if you truly picked one randomly, there would be a 1% chance that you would pick every number between 1 and 100. There wouldn't be like a bell curve around 50. If it was truly random with nothing else affecting it, then it would just be a flat 1% across that entire range of numbers. What's called the sample space. And so just so we don't leave people hanging, what number did you pick?
47.
47, not bad.
Well, thank you.
Well,
I appreciate that.
Mentalism would suggest you might pick a number like 37.
Oh, really?
So that, because there are some quirks in human cognition that mentalists, which is kind of magician, are able to exploit. But having said that, even in quantum mechanics, we're not seeing pure randomness. If we did, the wave function for where we'll find a particle would be flat. It could be anywhere in the universe with equal probability. And that's not what we see. So what we see is something that looks like, okay, it's partially predictable, and so it looks like there's something influencing the result without fully determining the result. And that seems to be a reasonable analogy to human free will, because there are things that pertain to the choices we make that affect them. Like I like pepperoni more than sardines, so I'm probably more likely to order a pepperoni pizza than a sardine pizza, but I'm not guaranteed. I'm not forced to pick pepperoni. I could order a different kind of pizza. I could order a mushroom pizza, or I could order Chinese instead of a pizza. So our experience of free will is that there are factors that influence it, but without fully determining the choice. Because if you say to someone, well, okay, you just made a choice, you just ordered dinner, were you forced to make the choice you were? And most of the time people are going to say, no, I wasn't forced. I chose this because I like it. There was an influence by my desires, but I wasn't forced. I could have chose something else, and on other occasions I have chosen other things.
Right.
And so the simple dichotomy or the simple split between it must be fully determined or it must be completely random doesn't seem to describe either our free will or other phenomena we see in the universe. Does that help you out, Gabriel?
It does a little. I definitely get this idea of how science shows that the world isn't completely deterministic. That being said, I mean, the wave function itself, which controls the probabilities of where you might find a particle, is deterministic. We can map that out completely.
No. It's describable statistically, but that doesn't mean it determines the outcome. Something has to collapse the wave function.
Yeah, and that's where the randomness is. And I don't see how we have control over the randomness. And even if we had control over like the general probability of the wave function, I guess how would we have control over that? Would our control over that also have some wave function behind it? And then would we have to have control over that and that and that?
So we're getting into some very interesting territory that I'm afraid would take longer to deal with than the time we have available. What I would leave you with to think about is the idea that there's more than one kind of causality. At one end, we have full determinism. At another end, we have complete randomness. And in the middle, we have something where there are influences without being fully random. And that seems to describe our exercise of free will. Now, what ultimately determines, in quantum mechanics, what ultimately determines where the particle is us taking a measurement of it. At least that's how it seems, although there's all kinds of debates, even in quantum mechanics. What ultimately determines the choice we make as humans is our will. That's the sufficient thing. And if it helps you to think of it this way, our will is a faculty that God built into us. It is a created thing, so it does have a cause. Its cause is God. He gave us this will, but he also built into the will the ability to make choices for itself without being fully determined by other things and also without being simply purely random. So that's probably about as much as I'm able to do with it in a short space, but I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Gabriel. Thanks very much. We're going to take a break, though. Peter in Colorado, hang on. We're going to go to you first when we come back right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Jennifer says, behavior in the parking lot after Mass made me think twice about becoming a Catholic.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you. No doubt. Yeah, sure. I've often said I think the number one impediment to making an act of faith in the Catholic religion is Catholics.
Yeah.
Yeah, hands down. Yeah, we're a mess.
Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders. Tonight, 11 Eastern, on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's open forum. As a matter of fact, 2 hours of open forum with Jimmy Akin. And among the many things that Jimmy does is he takes heavy responsibility for the School of Apologetics. And among his responsibilities, teaching courses there. He's got a course called Bible Difficulties. And I don't think you know about this. I got this note from Carrie who said, read this on the air to Jimmy. Thanks, Jimmy. This has to do with your Bible Difficulties course. For the great course. For a lover of the faith, you made the apologetics of this important topic simple and easy to remember. The course online likewise helps. The course outline likewise helps with memorization. The greatest thing is listening to Catholic Answers Live and hearing you apply these apologetics instructions just as you have presented them. I highly recommend this course.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Carrie.
Well, Carrie sent it to me.
Oh,
but
it wasn't Carrie writing it.
No, James wrote it. But
well, thank you so much, James.
Yeah, Carrie sent me the note. And right now, you can get 50% off courses at this Catholic Answers School of Apologetics. You can get them at shop.catholic.com. Pick up the course that's right for you. The Catholic Answers School of Apologetics at shop.catholic.com. Peter in Colorado, I told you I was coming back to you when we came back. Are you there with us, Peter? Hello, Peter?
Hi.
Oh, hi, Peter. How old are you?
8.
All right. You got a question for Mr. Aiken?
Where is hell?
Well, the important thing about hell is that it is not so much a place as a relationship where you've cut yourself off from God, who's the source of all good things. And so as a result, you're not receiving those good things because you don't want them. You said, God, I don't want these. I don't want to be connected with you. I don't want to be in your presence. And so please keep all of your blessings for yourself. And God says, okay. And it doesn't matter so much where that person is when they do that. If they have fully cut themselves off from God, they could be anywhere and not be receiving the kind of spiritual blessings that God would want them to have. And so, in a sense, hell could be anywhere. Sometimes, Cykel and I've talked about Laurie Anderson's description of heaven. It's exactly like where you are right now, only much, much better.
Yes.
Well, hell would be exactly like where you are right now, only much, much worse. And so, in a sense, hell could be anywhere. Now, there's a question about where the souls that are in hell are now. And souls don't have bodies like we do. They're not physical. And so they may not be occupying a place because they're not physical. They don't have bodies. And so how would they be in a particular place? They may not be in a place. They still exist. They're still real, but that doesn't mean they have a specific place that they're at. What about after they're resurrected, though?
Yeah.
Well, then they'll have their bodies back, and their bodies will need to be in a place because bodies need places to be in. And at that point, we don't really know where their bodies will be. Their bodies could be in a place in the new universe because God's going to renovate our universe and make it much better. The bodies of the people in hell could be in that new universe, or they could be in a different universe. But they will be somewhere. We just can't be real sure of where they are.
Okay, Peter?
Okay.
All right. You did a really good job. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
Okay, bye. Let's go to Michael in Columbus, Ohio, watching on YouTube. Michael, glad to have you. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy Aiken.
Hey, Jimmy, how you doing?
Just fine.
I just had a quick question. Moved into a new area, and it's a little unfamiliar with me, and I just had the question, should I be doing a litmus test before I join a particular church? And what I mean by that is that there's some churches I've noticed that in this particular area that I moved into that are a little bit more looser with certain teachings that are in the catechism versus, what I've been born and raised in. And I'm just like, hey, wow, that's pretty radical. I don't know if this should be something that I should involve my family with. And then how do I go about teaching my kids, like, hey, look, there's a reason we go to this one and not that one.
Okay. Are you a member of the Latin Rite of the Church?
No, Roman Catholic.
Well, I know. Okay, so you're Roman Catholic. You're not a Chaldean Catholic or a Byzantine Catholic or a Maronite Catholic or anything like that. Okay, so if you're a Roman Catholic, then you're a member of the Latin or Roman Rite of the Church, and in the Latin Rite, people are more or less automatically, legally members of whatever parish they geographically reside within. So every parish has a geographical territory that's assigned by the bishop, and if you happen to live within that territory, you're automatically a member of a particular parish. That doesn't mean you have to go to that parish. You can go satisfy your Sunday obligation at any parish you want. Even if it's not a Roman Catholic parish, you could go to a Chaldean or Byzantine or a Maronite Catholic or any other kind of Catholic parish. You can even join them, but really what that amounts to is you're getting on their mailing list. There aren't specific legal consequences typically for quote unquote joining a parish. In terms of finding a parish for your family, because you have the liberty of going to different parishes, I would say pick the one, do some research and try out more than one and go to the one that you think will best foster the faith and devotion of your family. That would be my primary consideration.
Michael, I'm going to try to get as many on as I can before the top of the hour, so I hope that was helpful for you. Thank you very much for the call. It's open forum. And up next, Frank in Louisiana, listening to EWTN Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Frank, go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually in L.A.
I read it as Louisiana, but it's L.A. here in California. I gotcha.
Yeah, no worries. I was asking about Catholic teaching on the apostolic prayer given by the priest to somebody on their deathbed. How does that relate to going straight to heaven or purgatory or whatnot? Please, and thank you.
So this is known as the apostolic pardon, and basically it's the grant of a plenary indulgence. A plenary indulgence is one that, in principle, can deal with all of the remaining consequences of sins, even after they've been forgiven. And in principle, it would be possible to receive a plenary indulgence like the apostolic pardon and go directly to heaven. However, even if a priest gives you the apostolic pardon, just like any other time you attempt to receive a plenary indulgence, it's not guaranteed that it's going to remove absolutely all of the consequences of sin. That's really up to God to determine. And so there are some conditions that one needs to meet in order to fruitfully receive a plenary indulgence or fully receive it. And those conditions are a little bit easier to meet in the case of when you're dying and you receive the apostolic pardon. But still, if you have these disordered desires that you're hanging on to, then those still need to be dealt with. And the apostolic pardon itself doesn't fix your disordered desires. So they need to be fixed anyway. And thus, even though the church is trying to do its best to get you into heaven as fast as possible, by offering the apostolic pardon, that doesn't mean you're automatically going to go to heaven without having to be cleaned up first.
Okay, Frank?
Okay, thank you. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to try to get one more question on here before we go. We'll go to Michael in Bismarck, North Dakota. Michael, you got to be real quick with your question so we can get an answer from Jimmy for you.
Okay, thanks for taking my call. It's about baptism. We have a friend who was baptized as a Catholic. They're moving into the non-denominational church, and they're getting rebaptized. They're asking us to participate and celebrate with them. Mm-hmm. Is that something that we should do?
Okay. So the way I look at attending non-Catholic sacraments is if the sacrament will be valid, then in a sense, God is showing up for that sacrament.
Right.
And if I if God can show up for that sacrament, then in principle, I can too. So if you had, let's say, a Lutheran family, they've got a new baby, they're going to baptize their baby, it'll be valid, I can show up. The problem in this case, the person's already been baptized as a Catholic. The new baptism will not be valid. God will not be showing up in that sense, and neither would I.
Michael, thank you. You were very quick with your question, and I cut it tighter than I thought I had, so I appreciate that. Hey, if you're on the line, stay on the line. We're going to come back with Jimmy Akin, and we'll continue with Open Forum. If you haven't dialed yet, you're welcome to call. 2 lines open, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Catholic Answers Live is for anybody. If you're a Christian, you can call. If you're not a Christian, you can call. If you're Catholic, you can call. If you're not a Catholic, you can call. If you got a question, we'd like to take it. 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. A little bit of bonus open forum going on today. Jimmy Akin is our guest. You can call with any question you want. 888-318-7884, the number, 888-31-TRUTH. Jimmy, of course, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. Been doing this for a while. As a matter of fact, I always forget the number, but 27 years. Did I get it right? 20s?
Today, this is 2021, right?
Yeah.
28.
28 years. All right.
Well, wait.
I like when an answer starts with, this is 2021, right? That gives me confidence.
I'm kind of unstuck in time.
Yeah. It's become a little bit less relevant, all this time stuff. We're very timey-wimey now because of all the changes in our society.
28. I just did the math officially.
28 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So call. Get your question answered. 888-318-7884.
Well, like before it's too late.
No, I didn't mean it like that. I meant you were experienced at this before it's too late. Let's go to Mike in Boston. I always like when people from Boston call so I can hear a civilized accent again. Mike, thank you very much for the call. But guess what? I logged myself out. So hang on a second. All right. Now you can go, Mike. Go ahead with your question.
Hi there. How are you? Thank you so much for what you do. I really enjoy it. And I was hoping, Jimmy, you could clarify your talk on purgatory, which said that those souls in purgatory can pray for themselves and pray for us. I thought I heard you say that,
I said they can pray for us.
Oh, okay. They can. See, I thought that I thought they couldn't do that either. But I thought that reason we are to pray for them, which is an extreme act of faith, and that our prayers are even more efficacious to get them into heaven. That was my understanding. But I misheard you say. Yeah, I thought you said that they could pray.
Well, so let's talk about that idea. Are you suggesting that we need to pray for them because they can't pray for themselves? Do I understand correctly?
Yeah. Well, yeah, kind of.
Okay.
I kind of thought that.
Well, you'll hear some people say things like that. Actually, that wouldn't be church teaching. And it wouldn't appear to me to be a logical inference, because all praying to God it can take different forms. Well, one form it can take is worship. Psychella, do you suppose the souls in purgatory can worship God?
Yes, so much.
Okay, well then that would be one form of prayer. What about asking for stuff for other people? Well, the church acknowledges they can pray for us, so they could ask God for other things. Could they ask for something for themselves? Well, I don't see any reason why they couldn't. Now, what the common theological opinion is that they can't merit anything new because meriting, which is a kind of cooperating with God's grace in a way that God chooses to give a new reward to, is something that, according to the common understanding, is something we can only do in this life. So it's commonly understood that once you die, you're not capable of doing good things in a way that will cause God to give you a new reward. And so as a result, the holy souls in purgatory would not be able to merit, and thus they wouldn't be able to do new things that God would reward by speeding their purification. But that doesn't mean they couldn't, just because they can't merit it, doesn't mean that they couldn't ask God to speed their purification or do something else. So I wouldn't say that they're unable to pray to God, even in the sense of asking for themselves. I would just say it's the common opinion theologically that they can't merit anything in that state.
Okay, Mike?
Got it. And just one last quick question on the saints, which is another point of clarification. Is the from what I understood, saints are in heaven, like full stop. That's the church triumphant. Correct. Like I thought that they wouldn't go to purgatory because they were in fact saints in triumph.
No. Everybody who goes to purgatory ends up as a saint. That's the purpose of purgatory. It's the final stage of God's saint-making factory.
As a matter of fact, I think there's kind of a tradition of calling the souls in purgatory the holy souls in purgatory.
Yeah, and holy actually is just the word for saint. They're the sainted souls.
Mike, I really appreciate you calling. It's very nice to hear a Boston accent time to time. Hope you'll call again, but I'm going to keep moving because we have been very busy today. Brandon in Toronto, Canada is up next, watching on YouTube. Brandon, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey there, Jimmy. Can you hear me okay? My phone's a little bit fuzzy.
You are
a little fuzzy, but we can hear you.
All right, great. Listen, I just want to say thanks for all that you do. Your book, Fathers Know Best, is like a fantastic book, and I use it all the time. But let me get right to it. So I have this kind of like proof for God that I've been thinking about recently, and because I'm Catholic, I know that probably someone else has thought of it before, so I just want to run it by you, and you kind of let me know who said this before. Okay?
If I can.
Okay, so this is the idea, so maybe you can help me clarify it a bit. Okay, so I'm thinking like if the universe is like a machine, right, that operates with matter and the laws of matter, right, that guide the matter, it should be kind of neutral towards its own existence, right? Like it shouldn't be in favor of its existence, or it should be unconcerned with existence. But there is something within the universe, which is life, that seems to be concerned about its own existence. So it seems to prefer existence to non-existence, at least life does, which seems to kind of tilt the scale, like almost in like a +1 towards the universe being oriented towards existence. So existence is a positive thing. Is that something that who has said something like this before?
Well, you're touching on themes that have been discussed by a rather large number of people going back centuries. Now, we want to distinguish between mere existence and the existence of life in particular. But basically, the argument that you're making is, it sounds like, a form of what's called the design argument. That the world looks like it's been designed to prefer the existence of life. And to make the existence of life possible, it looks like it's been designed to do that. In fact, in recent decades, it's been pointed out by physicists, even non-believing physicists, that there are certain aspects of the universe known as constants, like the strength of gravity is a constant, the strength of the electromagnetic force is a constant. And there are a number of constants that if they were just slightly different, life would be impossible. And it's not just one constant that's like that, it's a bunch of them. And so that means we look like we're living in a universe that's not just designed to have life, it's finely tuned to have life. And so that has resulted in recent discussions of the design argument sometimes being called the fine-tuning argument. And the design argument itself goes way back. I mean, I would say you can even find traces of it in the Bible. But it's something that has been discussed for a long time. It kind of got a big push it's either the 1600s or the 1700s by a clergyman named William Paley, who compared the universe to like a watch. You know, watches have finely tuned mechanisms in them. If you're walking along the beach, you find a watch, you know the watch was designed by somebody because it has these elements of design in it. And he said the universe works the same way. So William Paley popularized one version of the design argument, and then there's been a lot of discussion of it since. Now, there's also counter arguments to the design argument, including the fine-tuning argument, but it is considered by many to be a very productive line of discussion and a productive line of thought for showing the existence of God. And I would suggest, going to the Google machine and typing in things like design argument, fine-tuning argument, things like that.
Brandon, thank you very, very much. Appreciate that. And we're right up where we got to go to a break, so I'll thank you for the call. I'll take this break. We'll come back and do lots more calls. So if you're on the line, hang on the line. Right back with more Open Forum on Catholic Answers Live.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
He is honored by the Church as a saint with the title of the Seraphic Doctor.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
One of the greatest theologians and Franciscan mystics in church history, Bonaventure also wrote a biography of St. Francis that was commissioned by the Franciscans themselves. It took a saint and true mystic to understand a true saint and mystic. He died in 1274.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Hey, if you want another book to add to your giant collection of ebooks, we got a free ebook for you right now. Mysteries and Miracles of the Catholic Church. It's free over at shop.catholic.com, and you don't have to pay anything for it. That's actually what free means. I probably didn't need to add that part. All right, let's go to Anonymous in Virginia, listening on Catholic.com. Anonymous, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your ministry. I'll keep this brief. A close friend's father, who is an Assemblies of God pastor, recently passed, sadly. In lieu of flowers, mourners were invited to donate to a fund established in his honor to fund the formation of other Assemblies of God pastors. Am I, as a Catholic, permitted to participate? And if the answer is yes, is it a good idea?
Well, there's no canon law that would prevent you from doing this, and this is one of those situations where, like almost every other situation in life, where you're dealing with people who are going to do some good things and some bad things, and if you go to the grocery store and you buy food, you're giving money to the people in the grocery store, and they did some good by giving you the food you paid for. But they're going to take that money, and some of them are going to do bad things with it. Some of them are going to go home and get drunk or watch pornography or do something else they shouldn't. And so you have to make a judgment call. As long as you don't approve of the bad that's being done, and as long as the good at least is equal to and preferably better than the bad, and as long as you're not doing the bad thing yourself and you're not approving of it, then it is possible to cooperate with imperfect situations. Now, there may be better things that you could do with your money. You could donate it to a Catholic seminary, for example. But, and you could even, if you wanted, you could explain to your friend and say, I really wanted to commemorate this person's passing, and so I made a donation to this other charity because I happen to be Catholic. Or you can just say, you don't even have to tell them what charity it was. You could just say, I wanted to let you know I made a donation, and leave it at that. So I would say you've got a number of options.
Great. Thank you, Jimmy.
Sure thing.
Thank you. Appreciate the call. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Lots of folks on the line. We go now to Chris in Boston. Another call from Boston. This is a good day, listening on EWTN. Chris, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Great to be with you guys. Long-time listener, first-time caller. My question, Jimmy, just has to do with the Eucharistic sacraments.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm a Eucharistic minister myself, and I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older, but as we sit around the kitchen table with friends or family, or I meet people on the way, what's interesting to me is the amount of people that I've come across, more recent than not, just do not believe that the Eucharist is the body of Christ and the wine is the blood of Christ. And it absolutely, and they claim to be Catholic. And it just absolutely blows me away. Now, that's a statement, observation. My question is, how do you combat that? What would you say to them? And I know as a Catholic, we're not here to, fight or bash, but
yeah, what do you say in that situation?
Well, there are any number of things that I could say. There are different approaches, and again, it would depend on the person I'm talking to. One approach would be to say, well, why don't you think that? and they may have some difficulty that you could help them clear up. They may think, oh, well, it's impossible for a reason X, Y, or Z. And then you could show them, well, actually, it's not impossible, and here's how you can solve that problem. On the other hand, you could say, well, you do know that the church teaches this, and the church has good reason for teaching this, because this is the historic Christian understanding. Jesus said, this is my body and this is my blood. I mean, we hear that at every single Mass. And we have evidence he meant it. Because if you look in John chapter 6, you'll see that he was willing to lose disciples. Even people who had been traveling with him quit when he announced this and wouldn't back down. Instead of backing down and saying, oh, come on, guys, I mean this symbolically or something, he was even willing to lose the 12. After he lost other disciples who had been traveling with him, he turns to the 12 and say, do you want to go too?
Mm-hmm.
And he's basically drawn a line in the sand saying, if you're not going to accept this, then you shouldn't be following me either. And St. Peter says, well, who would we go to? You have the words of eternal life. And Peter acknowledges, no matter how difficult it may be to accept this from a human reason perspective, Jesus is the one with the words of eternal life. So you can trust him even if it seems hard to believe. And we can acknowledge that from the perspective of reason, it does seem hard to believe. But that doesn't mean it's not true. Just because something's hard for humans, that doesn't mean it's hard for God. God can do anything that doesn't involve a logical contradiction. And that's what omnipotence means. And so the idea of Jesus becoming really present in the Eucharist doesn't involve a logical contradiction. So it's something God can do. In fact, to God, everything he can do is equally easy because he doesn't have like energy limits. It's not like God has a battery that runs down. And so God doesn't have limited energy, and so everything he can do is equally easy to him. So it is as easy to God to make Jesus really present in the Eucharist as it is for God to have a snowflake fall from the sky. Those are both equally easy to him. So you could approach it philosophically, the way I just did, or scripturally, the way I just did. Or you could approach it in terms of the historic faith of the church. You could show quotations from the church fathers that showed they believed in the real presence. Or you could take all of these approaches. And in fact, often that's the best way. You want to clear away people's difficulties. You want to show them how philosophically this makes sense. You want to show the biblical evidence for it. You want to show the evidence for the church fathers for it. And you want to show them it's the teaching of the church. And to find specifics on all of those, I'd suggest going to Catholic.com and just typing in real presence or Eucharist or transubstantiation. And we have a bunch of references, a bunch of resources there for you for free online that go into the specifics of all those arguments.
Chris, thanks very much. We also have a 20 Answers book, and I don't talk about the 20 Answers books enough, so we'll send you a copy of 20 Answers on the Eucharist if you'd like. Just hang on the line and we'll send you a copy of that. I'm going to go now to Derek in Texas, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Derek, go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, big fan. So I had a quick question. I had a lot of people send me a story that's in the book of Numbers about a woman who was accused of adultery. And a priest made this concoction, and she was supposed to drink it, and if the baby died, all guided by God. And then if the baby died, that means it was like she didn't commit adultery. If he did die, that means he did commit adultery. And a lot of people say that this is support for abortion in the Bible. What do you guys think about that?
So, Derek, you were talking kind of fast. I couldn't quite catch everything you said. Why would you suppose this passage endorses abortion?
Yeah, well, people use it to endorse abortion, saying that it was under God's will that the baby either lives or dies, depending if
okay,
the
so
lady
this
committed
is a miscarriage understanding. Okay, so there are a bunch of problems with that interpretation. Now, for people who'd like to look up the passage, it's found in Numbers chapter 5, and it's a form of procedure that is sometimes called trial by ordeal, where you use an ordeal that someone has to go through in order to establish a fact in a court of law. And trials by ordeal have been very common in human history. There have been lots of situations in many different cultures where trials by ordeal were conducted. And these days, we tend not to conduct them because there's been a general assessment that, like, if you have, let's say you have two guys, battle each other with daggers, and you conclude, so they both go into this ordeal, and you conclude that the one who survives is the one who was innocent.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's, today, to most people, that's not a really great trial procedure, because the one who, suppose you have an innocent 90-year-old man versus a guilty 20-year-old man in a knife fight. Even though the 90-year-old man is innocent, the 20-year-old is probably going to win the knife fight. So who survives the ordeal is not necessarily the greatest test.
They should just do who can walk slower.
Now, one of the things you have to be aware of when we read the Old Testament, and Jesus told us this, so we're not just making this up, is that God picked certain and was willing to accept certain procedures in the time of Moses because the Israelites' hearts were hard. So God was accommodating the Israelites because they had these hard hearts, even though really what they were doing is not something he would prefer. It's just something he allowed. And Jesus cites this in connection with divorce. Moses allowed men to divorce their wives, Jesus says, because your hearts were hard, but it wasn't really what God wanted. And notice what we have going on here. Just like divorce involves a conflict between men and women, on which in a marriage, in a situation where the Israelites' hearts were hard, that's what we've got going on here. A conflict in a marriage between a man and a woman where the Israelites' hearts were hard, and just like God allowed the Israelites to divorce their wives, the Israelite men, because women couldn't divorce, here God allows the Israelite males to have their wives go through this trial of ordeal. But I'm guessing, because we know God doesn't ultimately prefer one sex to the other, St. Paul makes it quite clear that the sexes are equal, I'm guessing this is one of those things that God accommodated. And so we shouldn't look to the trial by ordeal for a woman who's suspected of adultery as if it really represents the fullness of God's will. And that means we're not going to be able to look at particular elements of it and say, oh, this must be part that is God's will. You can't just assume that. You'd have to make an argument of some kind to establish that. And that's going to present problems because this passage does not clearly refer to miscarriage anywhere. Now, that's not obvious in a lot of English translations. If you look, for example, in the New International Version, it will talk about how if the woman drinks the bitter water and she's guilty, then it will cause her abdomen to swell and her womb will miscarry. So that looks like it's talking about miscarriage. But that's the NIV is kind of a squishy translation. It's pretty interpretive. If you literally translate it, if you look at a more literal translation, it doesn't actually clearly refer to miscarriage. It talks about how her belly will swell and her thigh will fall. It doesn't say her child will come out. It says her thigh will fall. Well, that could mean a number of things. It doesn't have to mean a miscarriage. It could mean something else. It's clearly referring to some kind of abdominal issue or, in that part of the body, but not necessarily miscarriage. That's really a guess on the part of the translators in other translations about what this is referring to. So it's not clear at all that it even does involve miscarriage. But let's suppose it did. The thing about miscarriages are they're not produced deliberately. They're called spontaneous abortions. That's the historical name for them, spontaneous abortion, as opposed to a deliberate abortion. And here, they're not deliberately causing abortion. They're putting a matter before God and letting God deal with it. And God, unlike us, does have the power of life and death. So God could legitimately decide whether someone's going to live or die, and if the person dies, and they're innocent, he can compensate them in the afterlife. He can give them a glorious eternal afterlife. But God's making a decision that's his decision to make, not ours. And so even if you said, well, this passage represents God's will, when it's probably something God's actually tolerating, and even if you said, oh, it definitely involves miscarriage, when really that's not what the passage says and that's not clear, it's not talking about what we mean by abortion. It's not saying, oh, human beings have the right to go out and deliberately kill unborn babies. It's at most saying God has the right to judge in this situation. Well, duh, of course he does, but that doesn't mean we can actively kill people.
Derek, we'll leave it there. Thanks. I really do hope that's helpful to you in responding to those who use the Book of Numbers to make that claim. Lots more questions for Jimmy Akin. It's open forum. The number, 888-31-TRUTH.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Matt Swaim here. Tomorrow on the Sunrise Morning Show, we'll celebrate the feast of St. Charles Borromeo, the great Italian saint of the Counter-Reformation, and talk Bible foods with Rita Heichenfeld. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
To trick me into talking over the music, Darren. I'm not going to talk over the music. There's a little bit of groovy music for you. Jimmy Akin here, open forum. So you're probably thinking, it's Thursday already? But no, it's not. You're correct. It's Wednesday. We're just doing a little bonus open forum with Jimmy today, and we'll do the regular open forum tomorrow. 888-318-7884 is our number here. Up next is Donald in New Jersey, listening on Domestic Church Radio. Glad to have you, Donald. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Jimmy, I was wondering whether you have any ideas why the Pope is tolerating the Patriotic Church in China, and can he do anything about it?
Well, I think he's tolerating the Patriotic Church in China because he doesn't have any control over the Patriotic Church in China. He can't snap his fingers and make it go away because it's under the control of the Chinese Communist Party. What was the second part of your question?
Hang on. I think I put Donald on hold. Go ahead, Donald. What was the second part?
Any ways he could? Well, you answered the question. Mm-hmm. I thought he can't do anything about it, can he?
Well, he can't do anything directly because he's not in control of it. What he and his subordinates have been doing is negotiating with the Chinese Communist Party to try to arrange the best situation they can. Now, a lot of people have questioned whether they've made the best decisions Cardinal Zen, for example, has been rather critical of the policy that the Vatican Secretariat of State has been pursuing with respect to China and the church there. So, people can have different opinions over, has the right approach been taken? Has enough been done? Has too much of some things been done? And that's a matter that people can reasonably discuss, but I'm afraid I don't have answers for you on that. I'm not intimately familiar with the details of the situation because, frankly, a lot of them are classified. I mean, even the current arrangement that the Secretariat of State has with China is classified. It has not been publicly released. I haven't read the details of it. I don't know what the negotiations were leading up to it. I don't know what the alternatives that are available are. I don't know what the consequences of taking those would be. I may have suspicions and impressions, and personally, my inclination is that I see some merit in some of Cardinal Zen's criticisms, but frankly, he is much more of an expert on this than I am. I know very little. I'm an American who has a passing familiarity with this, but I'm not an expert. I'm certainly not in on all the classified details, and so as a result of that, I have a limited ability to offer an opinion.
Donald, we'll leave it there. Thanks very, very much. We're going to keep moving just because so many on the line. Let's go to Angela in Indiana, watching on YouTube. Angela, you there with us? No, Angela. All right, hang on, Angela. If you hear this in a second, we'll come right back to you. Don't worry. We'll just head out to California, go to Pablo, real quick, watching on YouTube. Then we'll come back to you, Angela. Pablo, are you there with us?
Yeah. Hello.
Hi, Pablo. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yeah, hello. I don't know if this is something you can really answer or give me advice on, but so me and my wife, personally, I recently came back to my faith. I guess you can call it a cradle Catholic.
Okay.
Great.
The thing is, when my wife, she, I guess, didn't really she grew up, I guess, quote unquote, culturally Catholic, if that makes sense, but not fully on, if you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
And at the moment, we're not really having difficulties, but she just feels lost at the Mass. She doesn't know the meaning of the Mass, and when she goes out, let's say with her friends who are non-denominational or other, let's say Protestants, I guess.
Right.
They try to invite her to the churches, and I explained to her why we can't really go on a Sunday because it's our, Sunday obligation to actually attend Mass. But if it's, I don't know if we can. Well, I guess to make it more simple, what is your advice to give to my wife in these moments?
Well, I would say that it sounds like that it's a good thing that she had a Catholic cultural heritage. That's good. It sounds like, though, that she could benefit from learning more about her Catholic faith and engaging with it more. Now, I know that sometimes, Protestant services can be, appealing to some people, because they can be exciting and things like that in some Protestant churches. In some of them, but hearing exciting preaching or music is not what should determine what church we go to, because what ultimately determines what church we should go to is what's true. It's what does Jesus want for us. And if you look in the Old Testament, for example, God gave the Israelites priests and a temple in Jerusalem, but there were other competing shrines in Israel. I mean, they had shrines to Baal, they had shrines to Asherah, they even had other shrines to Yahweh, to the true God. And some of those other shrines were probably more exciting to go to than the temple. There were some lame priests, some bad priests at Jerusalem, but they were still God's priests. And he needed to go worship in Jerusalem, where God's priests were. You couldn't say, oh yeah, I know those are God's priests, but wow, the local unauthorized priest at the shrine next door here in my little village, oh man, he's such a great preacher and he really strums the harp with vigor and And it's really, and I feel so warm and fuzzy when I'm at his shrine. No, the Israelites still had to go to fulfill God's will, to go to Jerusalem and worship God in his temple there. And so I would say we're in the same kind of situation. God established the Catholic Church. It's the institution he created. He gave us priests. Some of them are great. Some of them are not great. But we have to stick with God and the institution he created and the priests he wants us to work with, even if they're not perfect. And we can't just look at what's exciting or invigorating or that we find personally appealing. We need to go with what's true. And so we have I assume we have copies in stock. If not, I assume we have it on the web. We have a Spanish version of a booklet that I helped write a number of years ago called Pillar of Fire, Pillar of Truth.
Oh, yeah.
That is designed to help people who don't have as much knowledge of their faith as Catholics to appreciate it more. And we also have it in English. So whatever languages, Pablo, that you and your wife are comfortable with, why don't we see if we can get you access, either a hard copy or online, of our booklet, Pillar of Fire, Pillar of Truth.
Okay, Pablo?
Okay, thank you. That'll be excellent.
All right, just hold on the line, and Thomas will get the information of where we can send that to you, or if it's going to be an electronic copy, maybe via an email address. But just hang on, and we'll do that. And thank you very much for the call. And please remember, we do open forum almost every Tuesday and Thursday. And if you ever have a question that you or your wife would like answered, we very much welcome the call. I'm going to go to Angela now in Indiana. Angela, you there with us?
Yes.
Oh, hey. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
I was curious about purgatory. I'm fairly new to the Catholic faith, kind of old new.
Okay.
I was raised pagan. My mom went to the Catholic Church briefly in my teenage years, and then dropped out. So I don't have much, but I was confirmed and baptized in the Catholic faith, and I'm just now coming back to it.
Wonderful. Great. How can we help?
Heard you talk about purgatory, and that's one of my greatest, not concerns, I guess, confusions. You were talking about it being a saint maker, and I always heard it was like unbaptized babies and...
Oh, okay.
So they're different things. And now the place that people have talked about in connection with unbaptized babies is a place called limbo. And limbo is not actually church teaching. It's a theological speculation that is meant to explain why what would happen if someone was a baby or, mentally retarded or something, and they died without baptism. Well, since they're a baby, they don't have the ability to commit actual sins. They can't deliberately sin against God. And so they shouldn't suffer. They wouldn't go to hell. But on the other hand, if they're not baptized, then unless God did something special, they wouldn't have the grace in their souls that they need to be fully united with God in heaven. And so some theologians for a number of centuries speculated that, well, maybe there's a place that does not involve suffering, and it could even involve great joy, just not the full supernatural joy of being with God. And that's where unbaptized babies could go, and they called that limbo. Today, that's not church teaching, though. The church permits that limbo view, but it also permits other views, like maybe God will give the children the grace of baptism as they're dying, because the church would want them to have it, so they have a kind of, the church desires for these kids to be baptized, and so they have a kind of baptism of desire, either on the part of the church or their parents or something. So the church sees that there are ways God could have these babies go to heaven, and we know he's merciful and he wants everyone to be saved, so maybe he does. So limbo is not a matter of church teaching. Now, how is that different than purgatory? Well, purgatory, the word means place of purification. And the church actually doesn't really understand it as a place. The key thing is a purification, because most of us, when we die, even though we're dying in God's friendship, and even though we've been forgiven for our sins, we're still not pure. We still have like disordered attachments. You may just like that ice cream a little too much.
Why are you looking at me? Because you know it's true.
I'm not looking at you. I'm looking with you.
Oh, thank you, Jimmy.
So in any event, we tend to have disordered desires that can be with us through the end of our life, and we need to be fixed of those. God doesn't want us to be going through eternity with disordered desires, and so he purifies us of those desires, and the church refers to that purification as purgatory. We don't know a lot about it. It could happen all in an instant. It could happen in a place. It may not. It's been speculated, including by Pope Benedict, that actually what purgatory is it's when you encounter Jesus in the afterlife, that his transforming love burns away all of your brokenness, all of your disorder, and makes you perfect and ready for heaven. And that's what purgatory may be. But however you understand it, essentially, purgatory is the final stage of getting ready for heaven, where you're purified of anything that needs to be fixed.
Angela, did all that make sense to you?
It did, and I really liked the last bit.
Oh, good.
Me too.
Well, it's called the Catholic faith. It's awesome.
Purifying you, yeah. That's really wonderful, and that gives me so much more. I don't know. It makes me.
Oh, that's right. She's still there.
My twin sister died while I was being born.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's hard, Angela. I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, God can reach unbaptized babies in that situation or any other, and we can hope for their salvation and entrust them to his mercy.
Angela, I'd like to send you Jimmy's book, Words of Eternal Life. I think you'll enjoy it, and I know you appreciate the Jimmy's answer that he just gave, and he writes like he talks. So you can, if you'd like more of a material that you can meditate on as you return to the church, I think it'd be a great one for you. Just hang on the line. We'll get your information and send you the Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness, and where to find it. We have to take a break now. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin right after this.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
I've got a few things here and there that I've learned along the way. I'm always studying history, and I love studying history. So I try to bring in some of the historical perspective, especially at a time in our history when people don't know much history anymore.
Open Line with Father Mitch Pacwa, tonight, 10 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul's Street Evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, and we've been working through the calls, so we've got room for a caller or two more. If you'd like to call and ask Jimmy your question, it's open forum, 888-318-7884, and please remember, anybody can call. You don't have to be Catholic. If you've got a question, you're welcome, 888-318-7884. Going now to Joseph in Michigan, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM satellite radio. Joseph, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi there.
Hi, Joseph.
Hi, Jimmy. I run a insurance agency, and we target various industries such as real estate, manufacturing. We can do restaurants and bars, and we're recently coming across potential clients in the cannabis space. And some of these clients primarily are growers, so they have a warehouse with their products and then their workers, and our job would be to insure their warehouse, their products if they burn down, and if the facility burned down. And so I don't know what the church's stance is on if we're able to do that. I know, we can insure bars and maybe alcohol companies, but in the cannabis space, is that okay by the church's teachings?
Well, so the first thing I find interesting is the term cannabis space.
I
haven't
like
heard that.
that.
It sounds really trippy, like Cosmic Man. Now, having set that aside, you read my mind. You went where I was going to go. So essentially, cannabis is it's a plant that contains chemicals that have a psychoactive effect. And now, I am not an expert in cannabis. I have not studied it in detail, but my understanding is that it is widely reported that there can be legitimate uses of the chemicals contained in cannabis. For example, so-called medical marijuana. Now, it may well be the case that the circumstances in which marijuana serves a legitimate medical function could be exaggerated. Because for a while, in a lot of places, it would be illegal otherwise. And so I can see how some doctors might stretch it and say, oh, yeah, you've got a need medically for this, when really you don't. So I'm perfectly happy to acknowledge that there may be fewer medical uses for it than is sometimes claimed. But ultimately, it's chemical. And it almost any chemical you can name, even supposedly poisonous ones, like, let's say radium.
Oh, yeah.
Can have legitimate medical uses. And so you can then debate, well, what are those uses and so forth. And you could debate it further. Alcohol can be either used correctly or abused. The same thing is true of cannabis. And it's a judgment call left up to legislatures. Where do we draw the line legally? When is the potential for correct use, as opposed to abuse, so small that we should just say, okay, no, it shouldn't be generally available. It shouldn't be over the counter, in other words.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm not an expert in, and it's something that has to be left up to legislatures to make that calculus. It's not something that falls directly out of moral theology, because it depends on a bunch of variables, including sociological and scientific and medical ones that are really beyond the proper sphere of moral theology. So that's a judgment call left to the laity to figure out. Having said that, if a cannabis supplier is legal in a given area, I would tend to see it, unless I had reason to do otherwise, I would tend to see it as being in the same category as something like a liquor store. It sells chemicals that have some legitimate uses, but also have some illegitimate uses. And in this area where the liquor store is located, it has been determined that this can be legally sold. And so I would, unless I had particular reason to think otherwise, would say, well, I can sell insurance to the liquor store owner so that if his building burns down, he won't lose everything he's got. I mean, he'll probably just get insurance from someone else if he doesn't from me anyway. And in the same way, if a cannabis warehouse is somewhere that it's legal, unless something occurs to me that hasn't occurred to me yet, I would tend to look at it in the same light and say, okay, it's legal here. It would be legitimate in principle to sell them insurance in case they burn down. Just don't inhale.
That makes sense, Joseph?
That does. That's very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Well, I appreciate the call. Maybe if the cannabis space works out, maybe you move into the radium space.
A little bit more restricted, but there are medical uses.
That's the sound just dropped out on us. Thanks, Joseph. Thanks. I really do appreciate the call. Let's get John in Fort Wayne, Indiana, listening on Redeemer Radio on. John, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, Jimmy. I was calling with regard to a question that my kids asked me during Mass. We were praying after the Liturgy of the Eucharist, and as the Eucharist was being reserved in the tabernacle, one of our kids turned to us and said, "Why don't they put the blood of Christ into the tabernacle?" And so I really didn't have a very good answer, so I wanted to pass it along to you.
Well, the basic reason is that most of the time it's not stored in the tabernacle because the law says not to. The church has liturgical laws that govern what happens at Mass, and under ordinary circumstances, it's not possible to store the precious blood after Mass. The regulations say to consume all of it. Now, there is an exception to that, which is if you need to take it to the sick who can't receive under the form of bread. So let's say you've got a sick person who has celiac disease, so they would be allergic to the appearances of bread in the host, and they need to receive under the form of wine. Or let's say you've got a dying person who is unconscious and can't easily receive the host, but they could receive the precious blood as their viaticum, as their last Holy Communion through a tube. Well, in that case, again, you could reserve the precious blood after Mass, and for a time you could store it in the tabernacle. Now, the law doesn't say the reason why it's not to be reserved. At least my memory is that it doesn't say why, but I assume it's in connection with the fact that the precious blood is so easy to spill. You know, and in fact, that's one of the reasons that historically the laity haven't always been able to receive the Eucharist under the form of wine, because the precious blood is so easy to spill, and they don't want it being desecrated even accidentally. And so because chalices do not have screw top lids, and because you would have to like pour it from one container into another, they generally don't want that happening because there's the danger of spilling it. But they do make an exception for cases where somebody is sick and needs to receive communion in that way.
Awesome. Yeah, actually, so I was wondering if it was actually more of a practical thing too, that given the physical substance of it, that over time the wine that is the basis, the
it would
appearance
corrupt.
of it to us.
It would go stale. It would corrupt over time quicker than the hosts would, and that may be a factor that's involved too. But remember, it does sit around in bottles for a long period of time, and the alcohol keeps it from going stale. Where the corruption process starts is when it gets exposed to oxygen. And certainly if you had it out in an open chalice where it's exposed to lots of oxygen because it's not a sealed container, it would go stale even quicker. And that may be an element, but it wouldn't be the only element as far as I can guess.
John, it was your son that asked this question?
Yes, it was.
All right. Well, tell him he did a good job. And I hope that the answer
All right.
is helpful to him.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Thanks very much.
So we're kind of close to the end of the hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking I would mention to people that tomorrow we're going to do open forum again.
Right,
Jimmy
yeah.
Akin will be back for open forum. I think Friday Father Hugh is here.
Oh, cool.
And on Friday also a new Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World drops. This one about the canals of Mars. Will you be talking about the gondoliers of Mars at all?
I forget if I mentioned the idea that they should have gondoliers on Mars.
Yeah, Martian gondoliers is a very good idea.
Something I was thinking about that is interesting. We mentioned radium having medical uses. One of the things that it was actually used for in the early 20th century was as a drink called Radiathor. And there was this millionaire guy who would drink 3 bottles of Radiathor a day for years.
Oh.
And the problem is your body looks at radium because it's in the same column as calcium.
Oh, it puts it in your bones.
And it puts it in your bones. And especially it puts it in your jaw where your bones are under the most stress and need to be continually repaired. So I won't go into details, but he had some jaw problems.
Oh, that's awful. Yeah, don't drink the radium, kids. Don't drink the radium. Jimmy Akin, thanks very much.
My pleasure.
You can find Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World just by looking up Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. You'll come across it, and we'll leave it there. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here, Catholic Answers Live.